So last day te amra shei okhane dekhechilam je there was a particular conversation that was going on between Hayavadana and Bhagavata, and we have found that Hayavadana was being instructed by Bhagavata that you have to move to the Mount Chitrakoot, তাই না? সেটা রেফারেন্স পেয়েছিলাম, এবং সেখানে এটাও বলা হয়েছিল যে চিত্রকূট পাহাড়ে গেলে সেখানকার যে গডেস রয়েছে সে খুব পাওয়ারফুল আর কি, এবং সেই কারণে তোমাকে ওখানে যাওয়া দরকার। এখানে দেখো Bhagavata blessing him, এখানে পাচ্ছি may you become successful in your search for compliments and that to go, মানে সেখানে এই অ্যাক্টর এবং Hayavadana তারা সেখানে যাচ্ছে। So he starts singing again. That means here's the reference that the main play or the main plot, the plot that comprises of Kopila and Devadatta and also Padmini, সেই প্লটটা আবার শুরু হচ্ছে এখান থেকে। কি বলছে? He starts singing, and the following is a prose rendering of the song, a prose rendering of the song. Bhagavata কি বলছে? Two friends there were, one mind, one heart. They saw a girl and forgot themselves, but they couldn't understand the song she sang. মানে সংটা অবশ্যই সিম্বলিক, এবং সেখানে বলছে যে দুজন ফ্রেন্ডস ছিল, আমরা জানি ইটস রেফারিং টু Devadatta and Kopila, and ultimately here it is being mentioned that one mind, one heart. They saw a girl and forgot themselves. That means the kind of relationship that they actually kept. In such a kind of relationship, there was a particular kind of a problem that actually arose. কারণ এখানে বলছে দেখো যে তোমার পদ্মিনীর গানটা ওরা কেউ বুঝতে পারছে না। And then the female chorus sings, why should love stick to the sap of a single body? So that is the question, that is the fundamental question that we should also answer. এখানে কি বলছে যে why should love stick to the sap of a single body? এই স্যাপ অফ আ সিঙ্গল বডি বলতে এখানে কোথাও একটা ফিজিক্যালিটির ওরিয়েন্টেশন রয়েছে। When the steam is drunk with the thick yearning of the many petaled, many flowered lantana, why should it be tied down to a relation of a single flower? Basically, the song that here is being sung by the female chorus, here you will find that it is actually indicating to the particular concept of polygamy. That means it is not the typical monogamial orientation that the song is actually propagating. Rather, you will find it is indicating that a single flower, a single body is not, to be associated with a single woman. Then Bhagavata sings to, they forgot themselves and took off their bodies, and she took the laughing heads and held them high, so the pouring blood bathed her, colored her weight. Then she danced around and sang. So ultimately here you will find, as I've already mentioned, that whenever it is the matter with Bhagavata, whenever it is the matter with the other characters who have been introduced at the very beginning of this particular play, you will find that all these lines, all these songs that are performed at the very beginning or onset of this particular play, these are all indicating it's a kind of an introduction to the play. So here each and every kind of song, or maybe the wordings that will be delivered or maybe performed by these characters, these are altogether indicating or maybe commenting on the situation. So here it says they forgot themselves and took off their bodies, and she took the laughing heads and held them high, so the pouring blood bathed her, colored her hair. So in an almost theatrical, cruel orientation, this particular description has been pointed out. Here obviously we'll find that Padmini is being wrongly treated to some extent. When the female chorus sings, a head for each breast, a pupil for each eye, a side for each arm, I have neither regret nor shame. The blood pours into the earth, and a song branches out in the sky. So here you will find that the words that have been delivered by the female chorus, by Bhagavata, some patriarchal orientation is always in work. But somehow the character who is being treated here in a negative way, the female character, she has been treated, she has been pointed out as a character who is, lusty to some extent, lusty. And at the same time, you will find that Padmini has been treated in a wrong way. Or maybe she has been treated as if a lustful woman, a woman who is always in search of the gratification of sexual hunger. Okay, দেখো এই টার্মসগুলো যেগুলো এখানে পয়েন্ট আউট করছেন, a head for each waist, a pupil for each eye. So such is the description, and ultimately you can find each and everywhere the female character has been pointed out in a different way. Devadatta then enters and sits on the chair. So ultimately it's a theatrical move, as you can see. And as I mentioned, that each and every kind of theatrical orientation that have been treated with a theatrical way. Certainly, the main focus has been given on Devadatta and Kopila and Padmini. And now, for the first time, Devadatta enters and sits on the chair. And then the description: he is a slender, delicate-looking person, and he is wearing a pale-colored mask. He is lost in thought. Kopila enters. He is powerfully built and wears a dark mask. So ultimately, from the very beginning, from the very onset of this particular play, you will find that an antithetical orientation to the characters have been introduced. Where Devadatta, as I've already mentioned, that Devadatta has to be treated as a Brahmin, and Devadatta is a character in whom you can find that the brain is much more important, the head is much more important than the body is. And so far as Kopila is concerned, you will find that Kopila has been treated in an alternative way. In case of Kopila, you will find that the body is much more important than the brain. So a kind of antithesis has been incorporated. Okay, so that's why Kopila's body is powerfully built and Kopila is wearing a dark mask. And in case of Devadatta, you will find in place of the dark mask, there is a particular reference to the pale colored mask. Kopila, even as he is entering, says, Devadatta, why didn't you come to the gymnasium last evening? I had asked you to. It was such fun. So ultimately, we find that the first words that have been delivered by Kopila, this is altogether indicating towards the physical exercise and something. Kopila says, why didn't you come to the gymnasium last evening? You know that Devadatta, each and every moment you will find Devadatta does actually, he doesn't feel that somehow it is important for me. Because in case of Devadatta prefers much more mental activities rather than something physical. So Devadatta is preoccupied. He says some work. And Kopila says, you should have come. The wrestler from Gandhara is he is one of the India's greatest, he came. Nanda and I were wrestling when he arrived. He watched us. When I caught Nanda in a crocodile hold, he first burst into applause and said, and notices that Devadatta isn't listening and stops, pause. So ultimately, in each and every kind of a reaction, what is the primary focus of Devadatta's Kopila's concern? You will find that Kopila is thinking, or Kopila is preoccupied with the idealistic representation of a wrestling match. What he felt, what was the situation, what are the different kinds of orientations that Kopila is describing. The verbatim detail, and obviously you will find that Kopila's temperament, the attributes. Kopila, what he states, what he says there, as you can see in these lines, where is the description of the wrestling match between Kopila and Gandhara. Ultimately, you can find that somehow he was very much fascinated by the wrestling match. Why? Because it is engaging, the body is engaged, and when there is the reference to a body, Kopila puts much more importance to that. But ultimately, if you think about the reaction of Devadatta, you will find that Devadatta is least, bothered about such kind of things, because he considers that my mental work, my mental, let's say, association or mental work or activities are much more important than that of the physicality. So therefore, the kind of description of the wrestling match that Kapila is fascinated with, ultimately will find that Devadatta doesn't listen, okay, or he isn't listening to that, and he stops therefore, and there is a pause. Devadatta then, when Kapila stops, Devadatta says, then? Kapila says, then what? And Devadatta continues, plaster. I mean, what did Nanda do? And Kapila then, in a playful way, he answered, he played the flute. And Devadatta more confused. No, I mean, you were saying something about the wrestler from Gandhara, weren't you? And Kapila continued, he wrestled with me for a few minutes, patted me on the back and said, oh, you will go far. Devadatta says, that's nice. Kapila, yes, it is. Who is it this time? Devadatta, what do you mean? I mean, who is it this time? What do you mean, who? I mean, who is the girl? The no one, and pause. How did you guess? So ultimately, here you will find that somehow Kapila can prefigure, Kapila can identify that somehow Devadatta is an absent-minded person in this moment. That's why he wasn't paying heed to the, paying attention to the words of Kapila. And now Kapila could, to some extent, prefigure, and Kapila could identify that yes, Devadatta was preoccupied with a particular kind of a conception or imagination. And that's why he is asking that who is the girl with whom you are preoccupied with? And Devadatta says, no one. And then suddenly he says that, how did you guess? And Kapila answers, my dear friend, I have seen you fall in love 15 times in the last 2 years. How could I not guess? So each and every kind of reaction, each and every moment that you feel for that lady, or ladies to be in plural, I know that what are the reactions or what are the facial expressions that you gather. And somehow, as your truest friend, as a close friend of you, I know the science, S-I-G-N-S. So therefore, I can feel that what it means. And that's why he says that I have seen you fall in love 15 times in the last 2 years. So what it indicates, to some extent, Kapila's words, it's a kind of a stereotypical representation. Devadatta has been considered as a stereotype, therefore. And somehow Devadatta, as Duke Orsino, as you can say, I don't know. I'm saying that Duke Orsino and Devadatta are quite similar to each other. But ultimately, you can find that when we are going through the text like Twelfth Night, probably you have all gone through Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. There was a particular reference to Duke Orsino, as you know, that to Duke Orsino, the character, okay, that is the character Duke Orsino loves, it was of least importance, because Duke Orsino loved the concept of love more than any person. I'm saying that somehow the love for Padmini, okay, it was quite similar to that of Duke Orsino. But fundamentally, that when it is being stated that when a person falls in love 15 times in the last 2 years, probably it comes to our mind that, okay, this man, that is Devadatta, he was actually preoccupied with the concept of love rather than any other person or personality. That is the thing that comes to our mind, probably. That the person is the object of love. It doesn't matter, okay, whether it is, Miss X or Miss Y. It doesn't matter. But ultimately, we can find that somehow Devadatta was, he was feeling to some extent that I have to be in love, and that was the everything that he wanted. So that's why the Kapila's remark that I have seen you fall in love 15 times in the last 2 years. To some extent, it is giving us, it is providing us a kind of a hint to the typical character of Devadatta truly. And then Devadatta says, Kapila, if you have come to make fun of me, Kapila says, I'm not making fun of you. Every time you have been the first to tell me about it. Why so shy this time? So each and every moment in the previous cases, whenever you have felt something, the first thing that you have done, that you have informed me, that Kapila, my dear Kapila, probably I have fallen in love, and this is the picture of the lady, or maybe the lady lives here, and so please do something or something like that. So why so shy this time? That was the question. And Devadatta says, how can you even talk of them in the same breath as her? So ultimately here, Devadatta is too much serious about the love affair. He says, therefore, okay, when you have thought about those personalities, those ladies about whom you are talking about, you know, they and she are the same person. Okay? Before her, they are as, and Kapila says, as stars before the moon, or as the glowworms before a torch. Yes, yes. That's been so 15 times too. And they were exploding. Why don't you go home? You are becoming a bore. So each and every moment you are pulling my leg, and ultimately you are becoming a bore. So just go home. And Kapila says, don't get annoyed. And Devadatta says, you call yourself my friend, but you haven't understood me at all. So you are considering me as myself as my friend and something, and ultimately you don't know anything about me. You know nothing about me. And so therefore he says that you haven't understood me at all. And Kapila, and have you understood me? No, you haven't. Or you wouldn't get angry like this. Don't you know I would do anything for you? Jump into a well, walk into fire. Even my parents aren't as close to me as you were. I would leave them this minute if you asked me to. So such important person you are. So ultimately, how can you talk to me in such a rude manner? Because you know nothing about me. You know nothing about my feeling for you. You know nothing about my knowledge, and you know nothing about my, kind of relationship that we are possessing at this moment. And Devadatta a bit irritated, and Devadatta, don't start on it now. You have said it 50 times already. And Kapil, and I will say it again. If it wasn't for you, and I have been no better than rocks in the 1 year. You showed me that there are such things as poetry and literature. You taught me. So, you know, if you try to kind of differentiate between the character of Kapila and Devadatta, somehow you will find that Devadatta is a man of knowledge. Devadatta is a man of reading. So therefore, ultimately, what you'll find that Devadatta loves to read poetry. He loves to read, literature, go through literature. And certainly, when you think of Kapila, you will find certainly that Kapila is not of that particular type. So eventually, what happened, that Devadatta showed Kapila that there were such things as poetry and literature. Before that, Kapila didn't know anything about that. And Devadatta says, "Why don't you go home?" All I wanted was to be myself for a day, alone. And you had to come and start your chatter. What do you know of poetry and literature? Go back to your smithy. That's where you belong. So, a kind of a class orientation is always involved. As I've already mentioned that, whenever the characters like Devadatta and Kapila are concerned, or these two characters are concerned, we will certainly find that Kapila is coming from the group of the blacksmiths. Okay? He was to some extent, iron wilder. So at one point, you will find that when Devadatta has been treated as a man of knowledge, as a man of reading, he's a learned Brahmin. And when you find that Kapila is not of that particular category of status and something. So ultimately, you will find, so far as the sociological orientation is concerned, so far as the class-oriented differentiation is concerned, somehow you will find a kind of a hierarchization has been always made. In case of Devadatta, you will find Devadatta, he enjoys everything related to the typical caste-oriented differentiation, and Kapila has been treated in a different way. He's considered, go back to your smithy. That's where you belong. So don't try to read poetry and literature. Don't say anything about reading and so. You just got common at that particular time. And if you think in terms of mind and body direct, then you will find certainly that the mind of the head is always being provided with much more importance than the body of any other person. Kapila bit hurt. Kapila says, do you really want me to go? And the other says, yes. Kapila, all right. If that's what you want, and he starts to go, and then they will suddenly he changes his mind, and they will say, sit down. This is, of course, exactly what Kapila wants. He knows that what will happen, and he sits down on the floor and don't speak. And Devadatta gets down on the floor to sit beside Kapila. Kapila at once leaps up and gestures to Devadatta to sit on the chair. Devadatta shakes his head, but Kapila insists. Pulls him up by his arm. Devadatta gets up. You are praised. And he sits on the chair, and Kapila sits down on the ground happily. A long pause. So certainly in the friendship, the friendship level, if you try to identify the different kinds of orientations, different kinds of, if you try to identify the kind of status that they are positing at this moment, the kind of, the importance of the relationship and something like that, you will always find that Devadatta has been provided with much more importance, and it has been done by Kapila. Kapila is giving Devadatta so much honor, so much respect, and Kapila doesn't have that. So that's why it says that Devadatta says, how can I describe her, Kapila? Her forelocks rival the beards, her face is such a kind of an exaggerated description of the lady. Now Devadatta begins to describe her, that is Pradini, slowly. All this is familiar to Kapila, and he joins in with a great enjoyment, both. So that's why, as I mentioned, that somehow Devadatta, the character of Devadatta, has been made a stereotype, and that's why both were uttering the same kind of words in a laughing way. It has been a ludicrous way. It has been described. So her face is a white lotus. Her beauty is as the magic lake. Her arms, the lotus creepers. Her breasts are golden arms, and her waist. And Devadatta says, no, Kapila, you what? I was blind all these days. I deceived myself that I understood poetry. I didn't. I understood nothing actually. So Devadatta could feel at this moment, he was actually struck by Cupid's arrow. Okay, and that's why now Devadatta says Tanvi Shama, Tunni actually, Tunni Shama, and both they are uttering some sloka. কি বলছে সেখানে শিখারি দর্শনা হ্যাঁ পক্ক বিম্ব ধরষ্ঠি sanskritized মধ্যে ক্ষমা চকিত হরিণী প্রেক্ষণা মানে দৃষ্টি হচ্ছে চকিত হরিণীর মতো নিম্নানিভ অনেকগুলো শব্দ আছে এখানে দেখতে পাচ্ছ নিশ্চয়ই এখানে কি বলছে শিখরি রসনা and পক্ক বিম্ব ধরষ্ঠি মানে ওষ্ঠ আর কি পক্ক বিম্ব ফলের মতো চকিত হরিণী প্রেক্ষণা দৃষ্টি হচ্ছে চকিত হরিণীর মতো সেরকম কিছু শব্দগুলো আছে and Devadatta continues the Shama Naika okay born of Kalidasa's magic description as Batshana had dreamt ঠিক একদম এই রকম আর কি বলতে চাইছি the kind of description that should be attached with her it was just like what Batshana had dreamt of. And Kapila in one appearance she became my guru in the poetry of love. That means whenever I am feeling her, whenever I am thinking about her, I can write the poetry of love. Do you think she would ever assent to becoming my disciple in love itself? So what he is asking actually, asking about her, so where is possible that she will be my love and beloved? And Kapila says aside, oh, this is new. That means in the pattern of the stereotypical description that Devadatta always utters, Kapila finds something new in it. So that's why there is something new, something novel. And Devadatta, his eyes shining. If only she would consent to be my muse, I could outshine Kalidasa. That means if I find her to be influencing me in the writing of love poetry, I will certainly write better poetry than Kalidas. I'd always wanted to do that, but I thought it was impossible. But now I see it isn't at all impossible. Sorry. দেখো এখানে কি বলছে, এখানে বলছে যে প্রথমে আমার কাছে মনে হয়েছিল যে এগুলো impossible, that means nobody can write such kind of poetry. Okay, and then here you will find it has been stated, so I consider at the very moment that it's not impossible. মানে এরকম যদি কারোর কাছে কোনো কোনো প্রেয়সী থাকে তাহলে হয়তো এরকম কবিতা লেখাটা আদৌ ইম্পসিবল নয়, তার কাছে মনে হচ্ছে। And Kapila says, then go ahead, write then. So why are you stating, where are you just thinking about the possibilities? Just go ahead and begin writing such kind of poems. And Devadatta says, but how can I without her in front of me? So it's not possible for me to write a kind of a poem and a love poem when she is not present in front of me. How can I concentrate when my whole being is only thinking of her, craving for her? And then Kopila says, what's her name? Will you at least tell me that Devadatta her name? Oh, she has no name. And Kopila, but what do her parents call her? And Devadatta was quite anguished. He says, what's the use? She isn't mean for the likes of me. So ultimately, I must not think about her. I must not think about the way her, the guardians utter her name or something. And Kapila says, you don't really believe that, do you? With all your qualities, achievements, looks, family, grace, so in everywhere, in everything, you are actually sharing the features of a graceful person. Okay, so far as the quality is concerned, so far as the achievements are concerned, so far as your outlook is concerned, and if you think about the family and grace, so ultimately you are reaching the top. And Devadatta says, don't try to console me with praise. And Kapila says, I'm praising you. You know very well that every parent of every girl in the city is only waiting to catch you. And now you are in love with that lady. And how do you think that it's not possible that such kind of relationship is there? So Devadatta says, don't, please. I know this girl is beyond my wildest dreams. But still, I can't help wanting her. I can't help it. I swear, Kapila, with you as my witness, I swear, if I ever get her as my wife, I will sacrifice my 2 arms to the goddess Kali. I will sacrifice my head to Lord Rudra. So that is very significant and very important part actually. Here you will find that Devadatta is swearing. Okay, what does he swear? He is swearing that if I ever get her as my wife, I will sacrifice my 2 arms to goddess Kali and I will sacrifice my head to Lord Rudra. Such a kind of oath, such a kind of swearing he is making. তোমাদের বই থাকলে এটা একটু আন্ডারলাইন করে রাখো, এটা দরকারি পার্ট আর কি। And Kapila, and then the aside comment, this is a serious situation. It does look as though the 16th girl has really caught our Devadatta in her net. Otherwise, he isn't the type to talk with such violence. And Devadatta says, I mean it. What is the use of these hands and this head? If I am not to have her, my poetry won't live without her. Shakuntalam will never be excelled. But how can I explain this to her? I have no cloud for a messenger. So what is there in Meghdut? There is Meghduttam by Kalidash, as you know. I don't have such kind of messenger to retell or the story of mine. No bee is there to show the way. Now the only future I have is to stand and do penance to Pavanvithi. What is this Pavanvithi? Why there? And then Devadatta answers, actually she lives in that street. She lives at Pavanvithi. And Kapila says, how do you know? And Devadatta, I saw her in the market yesterday evening. I couldn't remove my eyes from her and followed her home. And Kapila says, what must people have thought? You followed her home, Devadatta, okay? Devadatta is following a woman, and Devadatta says she went into a house in Pavanviti. I waited outside all evening. She didn't come out. And Kapila, now tell me, what sort of a house was it? So you see that Kapila is to some extent, he was very much curious, he was very much anxious. Okay? The inquisitiveness that is present in Kapila was only to help Devadatta in this particular affair. It is not that Kapila was thinking in a different way. But certainly, you will find that whenever Kapila will be in front of Padmini, the mindset will certainly got changed. Kapila says, now tell me, what sort of a house was it? Devadatta says, I can't remember. And what color? I don't know. How many stories? I didn't notice. You mean you didn't notice anything about the house? And Devadatta says, the door frame of the house had an engraving of a two-headed bird on the top. So again, you see that a bird, and the bird has two heads. So certainly this is all symbolic, you see. I only saw that. She lifted her hand to knock and it touched the bird. For a minute, the bird came alive. And Kapila jumps up. Then why didn't you tell me before? You have been wasting all this precious time. That means you have everything, you know, the particular kind of knowledge, the particular kind of information that you have. It actually serves everything because you have already informed me about the whereabouts. And Devadatta, I don't understand. Kapila answers, my dear Devadatta, your cloud messenger, your bee, your pigeon is sitting right in front of you. So you didn't have to think about your cloud messenger. You didn't have to think about your bee. You didn't have to think about your pigeon either. Because all these messengers and bees and pigeons are me actually. Okay? And I'm sitting right in front of you. And you don't even know it. You wait here. I will go and find out her house, her name. And Devadatta, incredulous. Kapila, he's asking actually. Kapila, I'll be back in a few minutes. And that's, I won't even forget this Kapila. So you are helping me in this particular form. Shut up. And forget all about your arms and head. So forget everything that you have swear. So ultimately, that's why it says that forget all about your arms and head. This job doesn't need either Rudra or Kali. I am quite enough, and goes out. And then Devadatta says, Kapila, he's gone. How fortunate I am to have a friend like him. It's a pure gold. But should I have trusted this to him? He means well, and he is a wizard in his farm, in his field. But here, so ultimately you see that somehow whenever it's a matter with, kind of a possession and something like that, the beauty that is present in Padmini, somehow Devadatta was a bit suspicious. He says, I know Kapila, he's a very true friend of mine. Kapila is always thinking positively about my relationships and something. But if you think about this particular affair, does it look like very good to involve Kapila into everything? Okay, so a bit suspicion that comes into her. Spirit is rough and too indelicate. He was the wrong man to send. He's bound to ruin the whole thing and anguished. Lord Rudra, I meant what I said. If I get her, my head will be a gift to you. Mother Kali, I will sacrifice my arms to you, I swear. So ultimately, here you will find that what Kapila actually advised Devadatta is not following her. Rather, she is actually repeating his oaths, repeating his swearings. And then he goes out. The Bhagavata removes the chair and Kapila enters. Kapila says, this is Pavanviti, the street of the merchants. So ultimately here you will find that somehow Kapila has already reached Pavanviti, the particular mahalla, the street of the merchants. Well. What enormous houses, because it's the street of the merchants. Each one a palace in itself. It's a wonder people don't get lost in these houses and examines the doors one by one. Now, this is not a double-headed bird, it's an eagle. This, a lotus. This is, a lion, tiger, a whale. And this, God alone knows what is this. And what next in disgust? A horse, a rhinoceros, another lion, another lotus. What the hell is that stupid two-headed bird? What was the design? I couldn't make out. And goes back and stares at it, shouts and shouts. Oh, that's it. Almost gave me the slip. A proper two-headed bird. But it's so tiny. You can't see it at all unless you are willing to tear your eyes staring at it. Well now, whose house could this be? And looks around, no one in sight. Naturally, why should anyone come here in this hot sun? Better ask the people in the house. And he minds knocking and listens. Padmini enters, humming a tune. Padmini says, here comes the rider. From which land does he come? And Kopila gapes at her, a side comment. Okay, aside comments, in any particular kind of a drama, in any particular kind of a play, we find that the aside comments are very much significant, very much important. Why? Because the aside comments actually, they provide us the particularities or particularizations of the character. Each and every moment, we know that whenever the characters are in front of the other people, in front of the other characters, what he speaks, what he utters, these are to some extent just because of the characters who are present on stage. But whenever it is the matter with the aside comments, you will find that the inner mind, the mind, or maybe any particular kind of a scheme, these actually come to the forefront. So that's why the aside comments actually tell something about the mentality, the temperament, or maybe the scheme or design that is actually going on in the mind of these characters. So the aside comments are very important for the character analysis or something. So here you can get an aside comment, and Kopila says, I give up, Devadatta. I surrender to your judgment. I hadn't thought anyone could be more beautiful than the wench Ragini who acts Rambha in our village troupe. So that was the epitome, that was the maximum of beauty that one can possess. I actually thought about that. But this one, you're right. She is a Jakshini. Okay, Jokhini. Shakuntala, Urvashi, Indumati, all rolled into one. And Padmini comes and says, you knocked, didn't you? Kopila says, yes. And Padmini, then why are you gaping at me? Why are you staring at me? What do you want? And Kopila, I just wanted to know whose house this was. And Padmini, whose house do you want? This one. Yes, I see. Then who do you want here? And then Kopila answers, the master. Okay. And Padmini, do you know this is his name? No. Have you met him? No. Have you seen him? No. So, you haven't met him, seen him, known him. What do you want with him? And Kopila then again aside comment, she's got right. What am I to do with him? I only want to find out his name. And Padmini says, are you sure you want this house? Or were you, no, I'm sure this is the house. And Padmini pointing to her head, are you all right here? That means, are you okay? Or do you not have any particular kind of insanity or madness within? And Kopila is surprised. Yes, I think so. How about your eyes? Do they work properly? Yes. And showing him 4 fingers. How many? And Kopila says 4. Oh, correct. So there is nothing wrong with your eyes then. As for the other thing, I will have to take you on trust. Well then, if you were sure you wanted this house, why were you peering at all those doors? So if you wanted to just reach this house, so why? Why are you peering at all those doors? And what were you mumbling under your breath? Kopila was startled. How do you know? And Padmini says, I'm quite sane and I have got good eyes. That means I have seen you. I have watched you, that what you have done this half an hour or an hour. Kopila looks up and chuckles. So I suppose you were watching from the terrace. And Padmini says in a low voice, mysteriously, listen, you'd better be careful. We have any number of thefts in the street and people are suspicious. Last night there was a man standing there for nearly 2 hours without moving. Actually, it is indicating to Devadatta. And today you have turned up It's just as well as I saw you. Anyone else would have taken you to the police. Beware and aloud. Now tell me, what are you doing here? And Kapila, I can't tell you. And Padmini, really? Who will you tell it to? And Kapila says, to your father. Okay? And Padmini, do you want my father to do you want the master of this house? And Kapila says, aren't they the same? And Padmini, as though explaining to a child, listen, my father could be a servant of this in this house, or the master of this house could be my father's servant. My father could be the master's father, brother, son-in-law, cousin, grandfather, or uncle. Do you agree? So anybody he could be. And Kapila says, yes, right. Then we will start again. Whom should I call? Kapila says, your father. And Padmini, and if he is not in, then Kapila completely lost, because Kapila doesn't have such kind of intellect. And he says, anyone else? Which anyone? And Kapila says, perhaps a brother? Do you know him? No. Have you met him? No. Do you know his name? And Kapila, desperate, please, please, call your father or the master or both. Or if they are the same, anyone, please call someone. And Padmini, no, that one too. And Kapila looking around the side, no one here. Still, I have to find out her name. Devadatta, it's an aside comment as you see. Devadatta must be in pain and he will never forgive me if I go back now. And aloud, madam, please, I have some very important work. I will touch your feet. And Padmini eagerly, you will? Really? Do you know? I have touched everyone's feet in this house sometime or the other, but no one has ever touched mine. You will. And Kapila slapping his forehead as he sinks into the ground. I am finished. Decimated, powdered to dust, powdered into tiny specks of flour. And to Padmini, my mother, can I at least talk to a servant? And Padmini says, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't touch my feet. One can't even trust strangers anymore. All right, my dear son. I opened the door, so consider me the doorkeeper. What do you want? And Kapila says, determined. All right, gets up. Okay, you have no doubt heard of the revered Brahmin Vidyasagar. So ultimately, probably you have heard about Vidyasagar. And but this is possible. And Kapila, in which case you will also know of Devadatta, his only son, a poet, a pandit, knows the Vedas backwards, writes the grandest poetry ever, long dark hair, delicate fair face, age 20, height 5 feet and 7 inches, weight. And Padmini says, wait a minute. What is he to you? And Kapila says, friend, greatest in the world. But the main question now, what is he going to be to you? And then the sudden silence. Padmini blushing as the import of remark dawns on her. Mother, and she runs in. Kapila stands staring after her. So now you can find that Padmini had understood what is happening there. And Kapila says, Devadatta, my friend, I confess to you, I am feeling uneasy. Devadatta, my friend, I confess to you. Here you see that Kapila is alone. And Kapila says, Devadatta, my friend, I confess to you, I am feeling uneasy. You are a gentle soul. You can't bear a bitter word of an evil thought. But this one is fast as lightning and as sharp. She is not for the likes of you. What she needs is a man of steel. So she is not for you, but she needs a man of steel like me. But what can one do? You will never listen to me and I can't withdraw now. I will have to talk to her family. Okay, and follows are in. So ultimately here you will find a kind of encounter that is going on there. So certainly what happens, that Bhagavata says, need one explain to our wise and knowing audience what followed next. Padmini is the daughter of the leading merchant in Dharmapura. In her house, the very floor is swept by the goddess of the wealth. In Devadatta's house, they have the goddess of learning for a maid. What could then possibly stand in the way of bringing the families together? And then in the background, the marriage music starts. Padmini became the better half of Devadatta and settled in his house, nor did Devadatta forget his debt to Kapila. The old friendship flourished as before. Devadatta, Padmini, and Kapila. To the admiring citizens of Dharmapura, Ram, Sita, and Lakshman. So that was Bhagavata's words. And now here you will see that entered Devadatta and Padmini. So the conversation is going on.